And we continue at 1:05 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from DFW, back home in California tomorrow, just in time for the rain. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, SFMTA officials are doing damage control after that video went everywhere of the train operator who fell asleep at the wheel.
I'm sorry. Relax.
A train operator fell asleep at the wheel.
Yes, and she got jolted awake when it went 50 miles into a curve.
Well, if they were non-union, she could lose her job.
I'm sorry. Relax.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is legal analyst and co-host of the Too Many Lawyers podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcast, Mr. Royal Oakes. Royal, welcome.
Thank you, John. How you doing?
I'm good. Happy to be back from vacation and dealing with all of this breaking news. It happens every time I get on a plane. Let's go ahead and start out with the bad news in Sacramento for Gavin Newsom, as his former chief of staff was arrested earlier this week and charged with a number of fraud crimes for allegedly plotting to steal $225,000 and give it to a friend. All of this according to the Justice Department. Dana Williamson was charged in a 23-count federal indictment charging her with conspiracy to commit bank and wire fraud, defrauding the United States, obstructing justice, filing false tax returns, and lying to authorities. Williams allegedly participated in a scheme to funnel the money from a dormant political campaign to another person's account for personal use. She has entered a plea of not guilty and says she is innocent of all charges. What do you make of this?
Well, it's bad for Newsom. It's certainly a bad look. But, of course, it is Dana Williamson's problem primarily. I mean, she's the one who's been indicted on 23 federal counts. I mean, when you hear people talk about her, insiders who worked with her and for her, I mean, she does not sound like a good person. It's stealing $225,000 from an account that was supposed to be for the Attorney General, Xavier Becerra. So, yeah, it's a bad look. I mean, of course, Newsom is going to be running for president, he says, probably. Could remind people of the fact that, oh, yeah, Newsom and his staff, didn't he sleep with his campaign manager's wife? So it's just bad all around. But, compared to the really substantive issues, John, about Gavin Newsom in terms of what he's done to the state, homelessness and crime and so on, it probably isn't ranking up there. But it's not the kind of thing that you want to have on your resume when you're hoping to capitalize on the fact that, I mean, let's face it, he's really emerged as the face of the resistance against Donald Trump. And, the glow of Prop 50 may have already started to fade, but it was a big success for him. I mean, he stepped up to the plate, unlike a lot of Democrats around the country, and he talked trash to Donald Trump, and he gathered the troops, and he raised the money, and he got this wacky proposition passed. So for a lot of people who are looking at 2028 and thinking to themselves, kind of like Kamala Harris, I just don't think she can win. He's got competition, Josh Shapiro and, all the rest. Amy Klobuchar may come back, Pete Buttigieg, but he's riding high, but this certainly is an asterisk on his resume that he wished didn't happen.
According to Dana, when the FBI came knocking on her door, they told her that they wanted to talk to her about an active investigation where Gavin Newsom was the target, not her. And I guess over the course of this investigation, they found that they believed that she broke the law, which is why they ended up charging her with a crime. Is it legal for the FBI to mislead someone or to lie to someone and say, oh, no, you're not the target, someone else is? Or if they told her, and it's being reported in newspapers that that's what they said, if they told her that Gavin Newsom was the target, does that have to be true?
As strange as it sounds, it's not illegal to lie to suspects. I mean, there are some limitations. You can be so egregious that the courts will say, this is just fundamentally unfair and so on. But in general, if you're talking to, Joe Suspect off the street, it's okay for you to say stuff that isn't true. Bill, we picked up and, he said X, Y, and Z. Do you agree? So it's okay to do that. And in this situation, it doesn't sound like they crossed the line. Obviously, if there were anything to the idea that Newsom himself had some culpability, that would be having a nuclear effect on this. But in general, the police are able to give a lot of flexibility. There are exceptions. You probably remember the wacky case, John, years ago, where a guy's a suspect, and the San Diego cops take him into a room, and they put a salad colander on his head, and they stretch a wire from the salad colander to a Xerox machine. On the Xerox machine, there was a piece of paper saying he's lying. So every time they asked him a question, he'd give an answer, and they'd say, well, let's see what the polygraph lie detector machine says. They push the button, and out comes a piece of paper saying he's lying. And so he confessed based on the strength of the salad colander in the Xerox machine. And he was convicted, and the Court of Appeal said, that crossed the line. That's just not right. So there are limitations to how much you can fudge when you're dealing with the bad guys.
Now, one of the things that Gavin Newsom did after this story broke is talk about the Trump administration and how the Trump administration targets their enemies. But in this particular case, this investigation was started when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were in the White House, not Donald Trump.
Yeah, and there were a lot of examples of prosecutions that were commenced under Biden that have been continued now. But, it's not going to stop people from saying that, this president is weaponizing the legal system. He got so bent out of shape about the lawfare that he feels that he can bend the rules. So everybody's going to take it with a grain of salt, even if it may have started during the Biden administration.
What's interesting is in the last hour, we played some sound of former Kamala Harris aide Gil Duran, who is spiking the football about this woman being arrested and charged with a crime, saying that she was a horrible person who operated like a mob boss, and anyone who hired her should be ashamed of themselves for doing so. It's interesting that Kamala Harris, who I guess you could describe as a frenemy of Gavin Newsom, that people in her orbit are celebrating this when this is obviously not a good look for Gavin.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is amazing how people are just coming out of the woodwork and really trash talking this person. It just sounds like she had very few friends in Sacramento. As for Kamala Harris's relationship with Gavin Newsom, you're probably right. It's sort of a frenemy thing, but I would say the emphasis is on the second half of that word.
And we know that Gavin Newsom has taken a very aggressive posture now, as you mentioned earlier in the interview, with Donald Trump, Republicans, and anyone on the right side of the aisle. Well, a lot of that strategy, it seems, came from this woman, and certainly their social media campaign, where all of these aggressive people, these bitchy people that they have in their office that are doing nothing but trolling people online, that she was the fairy godmother that put that crew, that motley crew together. This certainly can't be good for their future prospects.
Oh, that's right. I mean, when you got a boss, people take their cues from the boss, and if they have a certain attitude and certain demeanor. And it's so interesting. I know you've talked about this, John. It's almost like the Democrats had kind of a meeting or a playbook, and their attitude was, oh, boy, that wasn't very much fun. We really got clobbered in last November's election. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to be super aggressive and angry, and we're going to talk dirty. And I know, watching shows like, Bill Maher's Real Time and other shows on cable where you can get away, with saying just about anything. All of a sudden, big Democrats were dropping the F-bomb and all sorts of cursing and so on that, back in the day, it would be unthinkable. But I think their attitude was, people want fighters, and we're going to fight like heck against Donald Trump. And they feel like the angrier they are, then the more people are going to like him and stand up against Donald Trump.
It'll be interesting to see if the strategy changes or they tone it down now that the woman who I guess hatched the strategy is now in trouble and has bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to change. I think their attitude is, First of all, we got to get back to the basics about it's the economy, stupid. It's the price of housing for millennials, and so they have to focus on that because again, they got to get away from the culture wars. They got to get away from talking about defunding the police and transgender issues and so on. And for weeks leading up to Mamdani's victory, people were saying, "Well, this is the worst thing," because if he's the face of the Democrat Party as mayor of New York City, the biggest city in the world, and he's a Democrat socialist. And, it's going to further split the Democrats in terms of the Palestinian issues and the anti-Semitism. So, it's hard to develop the best strategy when you're trying to make a big comeback. But I think right now it's just fight, curse, and just drum up a lot of anger by a lot of people who are unhappy about where the economy seems to be headed.
We're speaking with Royal Oakes, who's the co-host of the Too Many Lawyers podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Last night was a busy day in Washington, D.C., when the Congress, the House of Representatives, voted to reopen the government. It was mostly a party line vote where there were a few defectors on the Democratic side, and I think 6 total, and 2 defectors on the Republican side. But during the course of that debate in that vote, there was another issue that popped up where Washington Democratic Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez condemned a fellow Democrat, a Democrat from Illinois, Jesus Garcia, Chuy Garcia, who announced that he would not be running for re-election to the Congress, but did it in kind of a sneaky way, where he waited until the filing deadline, only told his chief of staff, who then got all of the signatures that you need to qualify for the ballot, and was the only Democrat that qualified in the race, and essentially Chuy handed the seat to his chief of staff. Her point is, you can't claim to be the party of democracy if you're essentially eliminating elections and you're anointing who your successor will be instead of allowing the voters to choose. Her Democratic colleagues came down on her like a ton of bricks and appeared to be siding with Chuy Garcia. What do you make of what happened last night?
Well, it just seems like they ought to change the rules because, as you say, sneaky is the perfect word for that. You're rolling along, you're a congressperson, all your pals in the Democratic Party, they're not going to run against you. They know you're going to win, you're the incumbent, there wasn't any big scandal, so nobody primaries you, nobody files. And then a couple of hours before the deadline to file for the primary, all of a sudden the congressperson says, I got some health issues, I think I'm going to quit. It's been real, goodbye. Oh, and what do you know? The chief of staff, as you say, knew about it. It sounds like they're cheating, but to the extent that's possible, why don't they just change the rules and say, if within a week or 10 days prior to the deadline to file for primary, the incumbent says, I'm out of here, why not extend it a few weeks? Why not make sure that, it's printed in the newspaper and all the possible primary challengers know about it? Overall, again, it's just a bad look at a time when Democrats are very divided over Palestine and Israel, over the wokester issues. They're still reeling over Trump's win over Kamala. This is not good to have one Democrat, feuding against the other, saying, hey, out in Washington State, he cheated. It's just not fair. It's not the kind of thing the Democrats want PR-wise.
And in California, you can't legally do that. So in a weird twist of fate, our government in California, at least on this subject, is cleaner than Illinois.
So that just proves we can't get it wrong all the time here in California. Every once in a while, we get it right.
And I wonder, even though it's illegal to do that in California, I wonder if that was part of the calculation that Scott Wiener, the state senator, used when he decided that he was going to challenge Nancy Pelosi before she announced that she wasn't running for re-election. Because even though she can't wait till the final minute and then say to her daughter, okay, I want you to replace me so you'll be the only one on the ballot, in theory, she could have resigned and there would be a special election, and maybe the date for the special election would be a date that gave her daughter an advantage that she otherwise wouldn't have, or who knows? I wonder if that played into his calculus there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It was kind of weird. It was kind of gutsy for him to come out before Nancy Pelosi said, I'm not running for re-election, for him to say, whether she's in or not, doggone it, it's my turn. I'm running. I'm moving from the state Senate up to Congress. I'm guessing that he is on her naughty list. It was a little weird to me. Maybe you have some information about that. I wondered why her daughter, with the famous name Pelosi, didn't say, hey, I'm going to fight for this. Apparently she's looking for his state Senate seat. I would think she'd like to jump up. It's a little fancier to be in the United States House of Representatives than it is to be in the state Senate. But, I'm not her career advisor.
My guess is they have some polling data that shows that she would lose.
Wow, even with the magic P word, that's intriguing, because I figured in Northern California that she's as close to political royalty as you get. But, all of this stuff, all of the stories you've talked about, it's just the everyday folks have to look at this and scratch their heads and say, what planet are these politicians from? Either they're stealing money or they're cheating each other. They're being sneaky. It's just not a good look for politicians. I think, Congress's standing in the public opinion polls, Harris and Gallup, all-time low. It's just kind of sad where they've sunk to.
And also right now, Royal, we're looking through some of the email correspondence between Jeffrey Epstein and any number of other people, including politicians, academics, celebrities, social media influencers, foreign entities. We're learning certain things about him. We knew that he had access to many of these people. But one of the things that we've learned is that many of the journalists who were covering his particular case and certainly the political ramifications surrounding it, and certainly the politicians that were in his orbit, were helping him out, either by helping advise him on how to blackmail Trump, as Michael Wolff is alleged to have done, or in the case of a New York Times reporter, tipping him off to what they heard the government was doing in terms of looking into his alleged wrongdoings. Is there anything so far in any of these emails that you've seen that is illegal, or is it just a bad look for some of them?
I think it's a really bad look. I mean, about 20,000 pages have been released. The Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are pushing to release even more just recently. This biographer, Michael Wolff, he's written several negative books about Trump. He emailed with Epstein over years. 5 years ago, Epstein wrote to Wolff. Of course, Trump knew about the girls. He asked Ghislaine to stop. A 2016 email by Wolff to Epstein. Hey, Trump's denying being on your plane. That gives him power. You can if you've got legal troubles, Mr. Epstein, you've got some leverage over Donald Trump. It just looks really bad. But I don't think there's any smoking gun that's going to cause Trump to lose sleep here. I think people are kind of past the Epstein deal. People figure if Trump was actually involved in something really horrible and sordid, some people would have come forward. Some women would have said, hey, yeah, he did it to me. I'll say it under oath. And it just hasn't happened. I mean, how many tens of thousands of documents do you need before people move on from the Epstein case? But this is yet another unwelcome development for Trump.
What's coming up on the next Too Many Lawyers podcast?
We're going to talk about the PCH crash, that horrible crash. The guy allegedly killed 4 women. And the question is, when is murder okay when it comes to car accidents? And also same-sex marriage. A lot of people were worried the Supreme Court would overturn same-sex marriage within the last week or so. They had a chance to take it up, and of course they did not. So probably people can feel calm and relaxed about the fact that the same-sex marriage is here to stay, and this conservative court is not about to overturn it.
And, of course, you can download the podcast wherever you download your favorite podcast, and the podcast is called the Too Many Lawyers Podcast, which Royal hosts with his son Connor, who is also a very bright attorney. Royal, thanks so much for stopping by.
You bet. Thanks, John.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, now that we've crossed the halfway point, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can
Google on YouTube.
You can get the free KABC app, the free KSFO app. We're on KMJ Saturdays at 2. Get the KMJ Now app. So many different ways to listen live to our show and download all the podcasts. You can listen to them while you're working or while you're cleaning the bathroom.
Scrub it.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a contributor to Fox News. He's the political editor at townhall.com, and you can listen to him on Talk Radio 790 KABC in Los Angeles right after we sign off the air at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Guy Benson, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, John.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. Now, I assume being in Washington, D.C., last night was a very busy night for you and everyone else in town as the House of Representatives decided to vote to reopen the government, follow what the United States Senate already did. And, Guy, now we can go back to normal. When we're sitting at the airport and we find out that our flight is canceled, it's not because of the government shutdown, it's because of sick leave abuse.
Well, that's true. That's the new normal. Although I do think we'll see some residual impact from the shutdown here for a while. But already we know it's improved the last couple of days. Hopefully that trajectory continues. But I mean, what a ridiculous and stupid exercise the last, month and a half was. Government was shut down for the longest time ever, nearly a month and a half, 43, 44 days. And for what? I mean, the Democrats who did this were simultaneously trying to blame Republicans for the shutdown, saying it's a Republican shutdown, when they were the ones opposing any effort to reopen the government every step of the way. And now they're the ones who are very angry that the shutdown's ending, right? If it's a Republican shutdown, you'd imagine that the Democrats would be thrilled that it was over, but they're not, because it's not a Republican shutdown. It was a Democrat shutdown. And the recriminations internally about caving to Trump or whatever, I think were always inevitable, because when these things happen, the party that forces the shutdown, because it's their only lever of power, they do it to rile up their base and to show that they're fighting, but they do it ultimately, usually in the hope that nothing substantive is going to be achieved by it, because the majority party, the White House party, almost never allows this tactic to work. So I don't know what the plan was, like do it longer than ever and then say, well, we gave it a good try and look at us fighting. Aren't you impressed? If that was the goal, I think the Democratic leadership now has something of a mutiny on its hands, as their base is angrier than ever about this.
What do you make of that? Because it seems like when you follow them on social media and see what they're saying, they're all blaming Chuck Schumer. He was not one of the Democrats who voted to reopen the government. There were 6 Democrats who voted to do so. He was not one of them. But the theory seems to be that it was a game of kabuki or pro wrestling or whatever, where he knew how they were going to vote and he was okay with it. He just wanted the political cover of saying, don't blame me. I didn't vote that way. They did. Because if they actually voted against his wishes, typically what happens is there's punishment that comes along with it. We saw that with Liz Cheney, where she had a caucus that believed in certain things. She would vote against the wishes of the caucus, and they would punish her. They would strip her of leadership because they were upset at what she was doing. There have been no United States senators in the Democratic caucus, at least that I have seen, maybe outside of the guy from Connecticut, although he's stopped short of outright saying Chuck Schumer needs to go. But none of them are being punished. None of these 6 voters are being punished by Chuck Schumer or the Democratic leadership, which leads a lot of people to believe, okay, well, he knew what they were going to do and he was okay with it.
Yep. I mean, that's it. So there were 3 Democrats who voted with the Republicans 15 times or whatever it was to reopen the government. So Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Cortez Masto from Nevada, and King from Maine, who's an independent technically, but he's a Democrat functionally in every way. So those 3 Democrats voted with Republicans for this bipartisan clean CR over and over and over again. And there was no talk of punishing them. There was some primary talk from activists in the base, especially against Fetterman, but leadership wasn't calling them out. Leadership didn't seem to be whipping those votes, saying you better get back on board with us and get on board with the shutdown here. You didn't see much of that. And so then you needed 5 more Democrats in addition to those 3 to end up getting to 60. And did you notice, John, they got exactly to 60, not 61, not 62. They got the bare minimum number of Democrats it would take to reopen the government. And wouldn't you know it, every single one of the new 5 who joined on either are retiring after their term or are not up for like 4 to 6 more years. So, the wrath might have subsided by that point. None of that is a coincidence. Schumer absolutely understood what was going on. Schumer voted for this in March. They all voted for this multiple times when Biden was president. These exact same levels of spending. It was a nihilistic, pointless, destructive shutdown to make a political point. And for Schumer's part, he is very deathly afraid of a base that hates him. So he wanted to keep the fight going, and the exit strategy was always going to be messy. And in his mind, it was, all right, I'm going to vote no. I'm going to stay on the no side of this. But strategically, wouldn't it be great if we got to the exact number of Democrats that we needed, and as many of them were as insulated as possible from the base after doing so? And that is precisely how it played out. So, yeah, I think the cynics are 100% correct about their suspicions here.
And now the Democratic base is calling for Chuck Schumer's head on a platter. And it reminds me of whenever you listen to sports talk radio, where people call in and they have lots of opinions about why the team lost this week and what they could do to win next week. And frequently one of the calls that you hear is, we need to get rid of the quarterback. The quarterback is the problem. If we were to replace the quarterback, everything would be okay and the team would have won the game. But the question is, okay, replace them with whom? Because it's not like there are endless possibilities. You have a roster, you have names on that roster. Pick a name. Who would do better than the quarterback you had in there that you picked as the starter for one reason or another? And you look at the roster of Democrats in the United States Senate, and you say, okay, that job is hurting cats. He's been around a long time. He certainly knows retail politics to get reelected as often as he has in a tough state like New York, a state that's very competitive, at least in the primaries for a Democrat. But he's managed to do so. He beat a Republican to win that seat, Al D'Amato, back in the day. But if you were to replace him, okay, who in that caucus would be better than him? Who would get you to the promised land? And I don't see anyone over there who is stronger than him.
Well, and here's the thing. You mentioned he's been at it a long time. You're right. Schumer's been in D.C. since before I was born by several years. That is a very, very long career in this, which has, I guess, some advantages when you're trying to, calcify your support, when you're trying to entrench it or whatever. It also, I think, is part of the problem in the eyes of many of the younger Democrats and certainly the activists. They want fresh blood. They feel like the old way of doing things isn't working, so that they view that experience as a strike against him. But your point is right. I mean, this goes back. Remember when the Republican speaker fights, a lot of this was like, well, we got to get rid of so-and-so. We hate Boehner. We hate Paul Ryan. We hate Kevin McCarthy. It's like, all right, then who? And, well, we don't like them either. Or don't make me raise my hand. I don't want to do that job. It's a lot easier to, play the angry fan saying bench the quarterback or fire the coach. It's like, all right, well, what's going to be better? And in a lot of cases, there isn't a great answer to that question, at least not immediately. And I would point out one of the other Democrats who's been there a very long time in leadership, Dick Durbin from Illinois. He's not in the running for that because he's retiring, which is one of the reasons why he voted to reopen the government. And he said, actually, in sort of a scathing speech, he's like, look, I dislike the Trump administration as much as you guys do, but I'm not going to hold a bunch of hungry kids and workers needing their paychecks hostage in this foolish strategy. I mean, that was a pretty blistering thing for him to say. He was one of those 8 who voted yes. The succession question about leadership among Democrats is very much unsettled because there are some knives out for Hakeem Jeffries on the House side as well. There is just a general sense of consternation and anger on the left. They're a very, very angry bunch. And you would think that they had a really good election night just over a week ago. I would have thought that would have been kind of like, all right, a moment of elation, a pressure valve. We can exhale a little bit. Pendulum is swinging again. We're not doomed forever. Let's just take a breath. That's not seemed to be the way those electoral wins have been received, at least among the base.
Let's shift gears here for a second and talk about what happened here in California yesterday, where Gavin Newsom's former chief of staff was charged by the federal government with fraud and corruption, accused of stealing $225,000. She claims, and she's pleaded not guilty, she says she's innocent. She didn't do what the government says that she did, and you're innocent until proven guilty. But she claimed that when the federal government came knocking on her door, wanting to talk to her, they told her that she was not the target of the criminal investigation. Gavin Newsom was. Gavin Newsom claims that he is not aware of any investigation regarding him or alleged criminal wrongdoing, and he put out a statement essentially blasting the Trump administration for what he regards as political prosecutions. But you look at the dates that she gave and the dates that the government gave. This investigation started when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were in the White House, and it was a Biden-Harris Department of Justice, not a Donald Trump Department of Justice, when this investigation began. This cannot be good news for Gavin Newsom in the long term.
Well, I mean, maybe that's how dastardly Donald Trump truly is, that he could somehow launch politicized investigations into Newsom's world while he, Donald Trump, was not president and, in fact, himself was the target of federal investigations during Biden. I mean, that is some real talent. That is some real nefarious talent on display there from Trump, if you believe this cockamamie, ridiculous. And to me, I would not necessarily... If you said, oh, what do you think about this former chief of staff getting arrested and all that? Is it going to be bad for Newsom? My instinct initially, knowing very little about this, would be like, probably not. Maybe she did some things. The fact that he put out a glowing statement about her and tried to kind of maybe hope this would go away over a year ago, that's not a great look for him. But I don't know if it's going to implicate him. I wouldn't get too excited about it. That'd be my initial instinct. But if he's out there trying to make this already about Trump and a politicized prosecution, that, I don't know, doesn't that seem a little desperate, going there on something where, to my knowledge, at least, he has not been directly implicated at all, at least not yet. He's making this about Trump already. I mean, maybe that's just like Pavlov's dog. Maybe that's the automatic reflexive thing that they all do. But I feel like there are plenty of other ways to play this other than that, if you feel like you're totally in the clear and it's fine. That's an interesting move and an interesting choice by him.
Well, she's also the OG in his office at being nasty and bitchy online. She was the first one to start doing that in that office and was the one that hired the cast from Glee to play Gavin Newsom on Twitter and social media and troll everyone who says anything that they don't like. She is the fairy godmother of that strategy. Well,
that's I wonder how much access she would have to Twitter, in prison, if that's where she ends up. That's something that she might have to game plan here. It sounds like at least it's like a contingency she ought to consider.
Now, my favorite part in all of this is that former Kamala aides are spiking the football on this. In fact, Randy, can we play the clip of Gil Duran, former Kamala Harris aide, on CNN with Alex Michelson last night talking about her?
Well, I would say that Governor Newsom, as well as Governor Brown, for whom I worked, and Javier Becerra should be ashamed of their terrible lapse of judgment here. The only reason Dana Williamson acted the way she did for so many years and what led to this situation was that she felt she could act with impunity. And she felt she could act with impunity because of the power she was given, despite the very obvious problems with her behavior that were apparent for years. And so I think there's going to have to be a lot of soul searching in Sacramento. This isn't just any Democratic operative. Dana Williamson had so much power in the California Democratic Party that there's a statue of her daughter on top of California Democratic Party headquarters in Sacramento. So I think there's going to...
So the Kamala people aren't throwing Gavin a lifeline here. They are kicking him right in the crotch.
Well, I feel like it's probably turnabout. There's a lot of internal strife. When you have a one-party state, which you do, you're going to get a lot of different contingents, right, and different cliques and tribes within the ruling party. And some of those people, whether it's personality conflicts or ideological or whatever, they're gonna hate each other. And it sounds like there is maybe some end zone dancing happening here from people who are not a fan of this woman and maybe not a fan of her former boss. And he said that there's going to have to be some soul searching in Sacramento. And I would submit that they might be searching a long time in Sacramento for souls.
Who do you think poses the biggest threat to Gavin in the Democratic primary?
It's an interesting question. I feel like right now being as obnoxious and shameless as possible is rewarded by the base. They want all out resistance. And so, J.B. Pritzker, I think, is trying to one-up Newsom. Illinois might be one of the only states in worse shape than California, arguably, but that might not matter, at least to a Democratic electorate right now. So I think some of the people who are not in D.C., right? I think ultimately you see all this anger of the base. The Democrats aren't fighting hard enough. I think it'll be an even tougher uphill battle if you are a member of Congress, someone seen as part of the current problem. I think that might be tough. So if I were Newsom, I would definitely be looking at other people out in the states, maybe some of these other governors. Maybe there'll be like a sobering moment where the party says, maybe we shouldn't put all of our eggs in the California basket again. Could a Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania run? Or, is he too moderate, even though he's not terribly moderate for the base? Is he too, let's say it, Jewish for the base? That's the big problem that he's got. It is so early on. I think at the moment it's just an attention economy contest for now. And Gavin Newsom is winning the attention economy contest. Whether that's sustainable, whether that gets you to the White House, I don't know. But right now he's built something of a lead because he's being talked about the most in this context, and he's doing it very, very aggressively, which the base wants.
Guy Benson, you can watch him on Fox News, you can read him at townhall.com, and you can listen to him right here on AM 790 KABC in Los Angeles at 3 o'clock weekday afternoons. Guy, thanks so much for stopping by.
My pleasure.
800-222-5222 is a telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Do we know for sure if Gavin Newsom flew to Brazil for this climate change conference on a private airplane, or did he buy a commercial ticket?
It has not been disclosed how he got to Brazil for that conference.
Okay, I have a prediction for you. I think it was a private jet because there's no easy way to get there from California. It took me 3 flights to get there and 3 flights to get home.
Now, I will say, before he went to Brazil, he did go to Houston first.
Okay, so maybe you can get a direct flight from Houston. Because I looked, and to get to that city in Brazil from Sacramento, you have to go from Sacramento to Miami on American Airlines, and then you have to connect on whatever the Brazilian version of Spirit is to get to that city. And there is no way he's flying international on the Brazilian version of Spirit.
Maybe that's why he did the rally in Texas, was because that was his stopover for the flight to Brazil.
How we doing, Harris County?
Just one great big excuse for easier air travel.
And he probably went to get some barbecue.
Let's have a rally at a hub somewhere. What do you say, kids?